Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, welcome. My name is SprinkleBeard. I stream every day over at Twitch from 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's just twitch.tv/SprinkleBeard. So today's video, we are going to do a conversation about what champions are super easily accessible to all players in Raid Shadow Legends. So why is this video important in the first place? It's because the game is horrific RNG, which makes the game really fun. Over on Twitch, we have an expression that you are given a whole basket of lemons, and it is your job as the player to make the best lemonade out of the lemons you are given. So with that being said, if the whole game is based upon RNG and there's no ways for you to specifically get a certain rare or a certain legendary, right? What would be the best way for you to progress through the game? So what we're going to do today is talk about certain champions that would be worth like leveling up to, let's say, 4 or 5 star, and then if they could be taken higher, we'll talk about that specifically, or why to take that champion up higher specifically. Please understand too that this advice is based upon generalizations. So there might be a champion that is super amazing in Faction Wars, and we're not focused on that because that's super endgame content. This is to help players that are new to the game, for them to progress further or to understand why a champion might be considered good and or why not. All right, so first things first, we are going to talk about your common champions. The reason we're going to talk about common champions is because every single person will have access to these common champions. As you open up mystery shards, you're going to be getting tons of common champions. There are certain common champions that might be good. They might have a specific use that, you know, is not terrible in the end when you think about it, or, you know, you might need something like an accuracy decrease in your party. However, for the most part, there really is only one champion that's great. We're going to talk about the runner-up first. So the runner-up is actually in the Undead Hordes, and he's part of every commercial. And that's Death Knight. The reason that Death Knight is actually one of the better common champions is because he does have a passive. He has a 30% chance of counterattacking when hit. So depending on how you gear him up, he actually does have the potential to put out some damage going back and forth. And then because he's an HP champion, there's tons of times where you're getting tons of HP gear at the beginning of the game and you might not know who to put it on. So there's a very small mention here of why he could be good. The next thing that would actually make him really good is if you get some accuracy on him. He does have a very low chance, but you could upgrade him with all the other Death Knights that you get. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. After I review both grades, we're going to talk about the best way to level up these skills. But you could get him up to a, so it's 35% chance of placing a sleep debuff. Sleep is considered one of the hard CCs in the game. There's things like sleep, stun, freeze, fear, and true fear, where it can cause your opponent to not take an action for a singular turn. Sleep is kind of the weakest of those CCs though, because obviously if you attack that champion, you'll wake them up. Most bosses are immune to all heavy CCs, so there's another reason that this might not be the best skill. But if you were to level up a Gray and you decided you wanted to use Death Knight, this is one of the advantages that he would bring to the team, that he has a counterattack. And then even better is that if a champion struck him, that when he counterattacks, he does have a chance to put them to sleep. So he does have a hard CC attached to a counterattack, which is a really good combo in this game. So he's definitely an honorable mention. Stat-wise, the stats that we're going to be talking about for the rest of the video, I should have made a little cue card for this. But we're going to be talking about if in general, for middle of the road champions, right? So we're talking about stats that are not super impressive on any champion, is that we would want to see 16,000 HP, 1,200 attack, 1,200 defense, speed 100, Anything above 15% crit rate would be amazing. I think there's only like 1 or 2 champions in the game that get that. Anything above 50% crit damage, anything above 30 resistance, and then anything above 0 accuracy. Because today's video is focused on your common and uncommon champions, a lot of those stats are not ever going to be affected. And there's going to be times where I say, oh, he has 1200 attack and he only has 1000 defense. That's because if that's not his main primary stat, the next stat, like his off stat, if you will, I only want to see around 1000. So because his primary stat is HP and it's still below that 16,000 mark, it's something that makes Death Knight look unimpressive. But yeah, he's got a low HP stat, a lower than normal defense stat, so he's going to feel squishy even in the best of gear, right? Even if you gear him out perfectly, he's always going to feel pretty lackluster in those regards. His damage scales off of attack, not HP, so that actually makes him a little worse, because now you have to worry about that attack stat getting up for him to feel good for his damage. His best stat really is his speed, and then having that counter attack. Next, we're going to talk about what is considered one of the better champions. And if you're brand new to the game, and we're also talking about brand new to the game and not having Ninja accessible. Right now, so we're in July, but from July 15th to October 15th of 2021, if you sign in for 7 days, you get a free legendary champion named Ninja. This video is going to be based around if you do not have Ninja, if you're not getting Ninja, things like that. Or if you just want if you're just curious, hey, like, why are certain champions good, or what do they do that's well? So next here, we are going to go into Sister Militant. So again, looking at stats, 16,000 HP, she is well below that. Attack around 1,200, way below. Defense, I would want to see as 1,000 since she's an attack champion. So that's low. Speed is in a good place, just like Death Knight. Crit rate, crit damage, resist, accuracy, those are all fine. They're normal. But what makes her so good is that she's an attack champion with this giant sword. She actually attacks all enemies. And why this is good is that when you're playing through the campaign for your first time, so like let's say on easy, and even when you're getting through hard, attacks that hit all enemies feel super, super good. And this attack is on an A1. So A1 being action 1. Mind you, she only has 1 action. But the point, though, is that she'll strike all enemies. You do get some free gear sets at the beginning of the game. So you could put her in something like you get a vampire set on your first week. Or what I have more often done is I've put her or some of the other champions I'll name in this video in the counterattack set that you get on week 2. Because they are 4-star pieces of gear, which can really help supplement these bad base stats. But then with the counterattack set, she has a 35% chance to retaliate upon taking any damage in the game. So her retaliation would attack all enemies. It feels amazing, and then if you take her into things like the arena, that's where she can really shine at. In the campaign, she shines very well, and then when you get to the point of doing dungeons, same thing. She shines at the very beginning stages of dungeons. In general, though, I would not take her or the skeleton that we just reviewed past like level 40. If you upgrade them to a 4-star rank, that is up to you. It's not a terrible decision. On this video, though, or not on this video, on this account, on this channel, there we go. On this channel, we do discuss what is kind of the best thing that you should do first, and we do encourage getting your starter or getting your first campaign farmer, which is usually the same champion for like majority of accounts, giving them your vampire set and getting them closer to 60 or getting them as close to 60 as quickly as possible, because it'll waste the least amount of time in a game that plays very much like a marathon, a game that you have to be playing for a very long time, but the game is very well designed that it's easy to play for a long time. So earlier I said, well, we can level up these skills, but how do we level up these skills? So the easiest way is we are going to go into the tavern, and then we're going to go to upgrade skills on the right, And then we're going to go down to our champions. So mine, I'm sorry that I have so many champions for us to look through, but we will get there. So I mentioned, Death Knight here. As you can see, when I pick him and I'm on the upgrade skills, here a bunch of books show up. Now I could, if I really wanted to, give him some of these more powerful books. So blue books can be used on rare champions and below. Purple books can be used on epic champions and below. And legendary books can be used on any champion in the game currently. Obviously, we don't want to give our legendary books to our common Death Knight, so be very careful when you're selecting who to give books to. Recently, we kind of did a review of how rare legendary books truly are in this game. We did it on our Twitch channel. I haven't made a video on it yet. That will probably be a video coming out fairly soon, because we did do a book video all of its own, but we weren't focused on legendary books on that video. Anyways, get back on track. To upgrade his skill here, we can feed off duplicate copies of himself to use as books. So there's a reason for you to have dupes, as we call them in the community, of a champion. Now, his passive payback skill, it's called Payback, does not have any level up. There are other champions in the game. I can show one off in just a moment where their passives can be affected by having level up. So there might be a reason that you want to level up a certain champion, or if they have multiple skills, you might want all the books to try to land on one skill. Understand though, this is another way of RNG. But here we can take our champions, and if we feed them off, we can upgrade the skill. Because he only has one skill that can be booked, that means we are guaranteed for our books to land in that skill. So here we have 3 copies of Death Knight. If I upgrade him, this would get up to level 3, so he would get an additional 5% buff chance and an increased 10% damage to a skill. This is what makes these commons worth talking about, and why we're making an entire video kind of based around the concept of it, is that, I think I have Sister Militants up here, is that if you feed off multiple copies, you can get their damage up to the highest point that they can have damage, and they will feel better, or like they'll feel about equal to some of your rares, if not maybe better, because they're already booked, and the damage scaling that they get from that can be quite amazing. So that is the quick version of why we're talking about all these champions, is that you will easily get them on your account, and then any duplications of them that you get, or if you find one of them in the market and you're like, oh sweet, I'm working on Swordsman, I can now use duplicates of him, you might buy a duplicate of him or Sister Militant to level them up, as well as uncommon champions sometimes will show up in the marketplace. So if you're trying to upgrade their skills, there is a reason for you to be looking in the market for them. Let's get back on track. We are now going to talk about uncommons. So unfortunately, in the game as it currently stands, there aren't a whole lot of commons that are super of note, worth using. Even Sister Militant, she'll feel very good on your normal playthrough, and she'll feel like she's doing amazing damage. By the time you get to hard, you'll feel like she's still putting in her work, right? But she will not feel amazing anymore. And a lot of these champions too, if you try to gear them with the gear you're getting from the campaign, so if you're on normal, you'll get like 1, 2, 3 star. On this channel, we teach get rid of all the 1 star and 2 star. The 3 star equipment will only take Sister Militant so far, even if you build her perfectly. So let's talk about uncommons, right? So uncommons usually have 2 skills. They start off being able to get to like level 20, which gives you a bigger advantage over your commons, right? So which of the uncommons are really good or really worth mentioning, and why? Here's the thing. There's going to be those one-off skills like this one, attacks an enemy and has a 50% chance of placing a weaken debuff. Weaken causes the target to take, in this case, an extra 15% damage. If it's a 25% weaken, it's 25% more damage. There's going to be that uncommon that has a one-off skill that might be really good, but what we're talking about on this video today is consistency. What's a champion that will consistently be good on your account? So, let's start off with the very, very best uncommons that you can get. And they are also from the Sacred Art Order, just like our sister Militant. It's kind of an interesting theme in this game. So the two champions, we're going to talk about the one that is going to be replaced first, and then we'll talk about his brother that you might not ever replace. A lot of people still use him at level 60, and he's the only uncommon I absolutely think is worth level 60ing. All other ones I would stop at like maybe rank 5, right? I would not take them all the way up. And even then, Outlaw Monk, hopefully you get a rare or an epic that replaces him. But let's talk about Outlaw Monk here. So stat-wise, he's below 16,000. He does have that 1,200 attack, so that's great. And he's an attack champion, so that works really well together. His defense is very poor. Speed is a little slow compared to the 100 that I would like to see. Oh, I'm sorry. So I should say for defense, we would like to see that around 1,000, but it's about 700, so it's a bit low. And then no additional stats lower. That's fine. The additional stats as well, guys, we're talking about when they're a 6-star champion. Understand when you first get them and they're like level 2, their stats are going to be significantly lower. It's all right. What we're aiming at is why you would want to fully level them up and where they'll be great at, right? So let's review his skills. We have Foul Play, so places 2 5% poisons. So 5% poisons are the better poisons in this game. On the target for 2 turns. So he chooses one target and basically guarantees 2 5% poisons. Now, in this game, I wish that they had said this, or would maybe they'll do this eventually. So anybody from Plarium, if you're watching, please has a 100% chance to place 2 poison debuffs on the target, so that way players understand that it's affected by accuracy. But this makes him a really good boss killer. Putting on 10% damage every time the boss takes a turn for 2 turns, so that's 20% of their HP gone over 2 turns. Makes him really good for something like Clan Boss, or even killing off things like dragons or bosses at the end of stages. Throughout most stages, Outlaw Monk is not going to be great, and you're going to feel like he's kind of a dead weight that you have to carry to the boss. But once you get to the boss, and if you have some accuracy on him, when he lands these foul plays, you're going to notice them a whole lot, just taking away the boss's health. His other skill is actually not bad as well. So attacks one enemy and has a 10% chance of granting an extra turn, with an additional 15% chance of letting that happen. So the concept with him, obviously, is that he poisons, and then as he attacks with his A1, he has a chance to get an extra turn, which decreases the cooldown on his foul play, causing him to poison more often. So he's really not a bad champion. He's probably going to be your first poisoner in the game to help you with Clan Boss if you did not pick Kale as your starter, because Kale has a lot of poisons in his kit. Does that mean it's worth restarting your account? No, you can just use Outlaw Monk. Don't stress it. Again, you might be using him on other bosses as well. All the starters are pretty much equal except for Gallic. Gallic might be the only character where if you are about to play or you just started today, he might be the only reason you might reset your account. He's perfectly fine, though. You can use Gallic to great effect, and then as you get new champions, you would trade out on Gallic. Let's get back on topic, though. So, the next one, though, is Armiger. Armiger is actually considered one of the best champions, like, still in the game, because the 2 things his kit does, no other champion does what his kit specifically does, except for a rare that is stupid amazing. Not the point of the video. And he's often used in tandem with that rare. So 16,000 HP, he's at 15, so he's not bad. He's gotten a low attack and a low defense. So for him being a defensive champion, I would have liked to see that closer to 1,200. And then speed, he's very low, right? He's at 92 compared to the 100, and no additional stats below. So why is he amazing if a lot of his stats are like kind of subpar and his HP is his highest stat, not his defense? So, attacks one enemy. Enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived. That alone is already good, and then the fact that you can get a 1-turn cooldown on it is great. But it's how the damage is based. So it goes off of defense and enemy maximum HP. So the more enemies you have on the screen, the more damage that this will do. So as he strikes one enemy, he can do a buttload of damage, especially when you talk about giant health sponges like end of area bosses, or or to things like Clan Boss or Spider Queen. You can do a whole lot of damage to these really big health spongy bosses. His other skill's not even bad as well. So attacks one enemy. Again, a 100% chance decreases the turn meter by 30% if this attack is critical. So when he hits an enemy, he'll reduce that yellow bar below their health, which determines when they will get their next turn. He'll decrease that by 30%, which is quite amazing if the attack is critical, and then obviously if he has enough accuracy to make sure that it lands. I'm sorry, give me 1 second to get a drink here. All right, so these would be your immediate champions for the uncommons. These would be your immediate champions for the uncommons to really progress you through the game. You do get a free uncommon in the first campaign. I think when you beat level 2 or 3, you do get Crusader, and a lot of people like him because he has an ally attack. So if that attacks with your starter character, it feels like it does an amazing damage. He's not bad, again though, looking stat-wise. He's subpar in almost every stat. He does get additional crit damage. So he's not somebody you would ever want to 6-star unless you're really in love with his character design. It's just unfortunate that the champions they give you at the very beginning of the game, it's nice that they get outscaled, so it encourages you to play with other characters. It is unfortunate, though, like unlike Pokemon, where you fall in love with your main character, in this game, eventually you do tend to outgrow certain characters because the kits of rares, uncommon, or rares, epics, and eventually legendaries is just so much more powerful. So, with that being said, is there other champions that are worth mentioning? Yes and no. So, we're going to go over some of the other mentions, and a bunch of them have different reasons for being good. So you start off with Sniper. Archer is kind of like an exact clone. Her stats are almost in the exact same place, and she pretty much does the exact same thing that Sniper does. So she's kind of an honorable mention in that regard, that she wouldn't be terrible. The reason that we're not going to really go into her skills heavily is because she's of the Magic Affinity, and you already start off with other Magic Affinity champions that are already doing her job, if not doing it better. So we don't want to focus too much on that, but she is an honorable mention. Duelist is another character that she can keep herself alive. So she attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of stun. 50% on stun is actually really good in this game. And then if you upgrade her, it does get to 75%. Again, bosses cannot be stunned. But the other thing that she can do is attacks one enemy, heals by 20% of the damage inflicted. She's a champion that can kind of keep herself alive and then just keep continuously stunning over and over again, which could help you get through some of the more tricky waves or get rid of certain characters that might be more threatening, might be useful in the arena. Again, because it's only a 50% chance, I don't heavily encourage this, but she's kind of that honorable mention of, well, she's not terrible, and she has some self-sustain and a decent speed stat to get her in there to stun your targets, right? We are not necessarily going to go over every single faction and talk about their honorable mentions, because each one will have somebody that you could use. So to get back on track, we're going to jump straight into Lizardmen. And as we scroll down, there are two very heavy mentions in here. The best one is Soros. So just like Sister Militant, how we encourage to use her, Soros is kind of like her big brother that's a lot more terrifying. So HP, he is low, but he does get up to that 1200 attack that we like to see. His defense is low, and his speed is awful. So he does come with a giant drawback, and it's very hard to get his speed up to being decent. However, because he has this giant drawback to speed, let's see why he's still so good and everybody uses him. So number one, he attacks all enemies 2 times with his A2. has a 10% chance of placing a heal reduction debuff for 1 turn. However, if the target has less than or equal to 40% of their HP, he instead has a 100% chance of placing that heal reduction. This can be great, and some of the bosses in the campaign will keep healing themselves over and over again. And that's the game either trying to teach you that you have to burst them down, or you might need to play with an anti-heal, and Soros has one of the more reliable anti-heals that you can have in the game. His A1 then is an attacks all enemies. The other thing that makes Soros so amazing is that when you're in the campaign, you can specifically farm for him. So if you go to campaign 10, he is one of the drops. Here, I can just show it off real quick. He is one of the drops that you can actually get, meaning that it is easier to book him and get these 4 extra copies and 3 extra copies to fully book him up to his maximum stats compared to a lot of the other champions that we've mentioned here today. Yeah, I just wanted to check that Outlaw Monk was not in here. But yeah, that's one of the reasons that Soros is one of the top ranking uncommons, that if you don't find him in here, but like here we have Death Knight. So if I wanted to get Death Knight to start fully booking him up, or if I wanted to use Sun Tribe, who I think has a really great cosmetic look, this is the reason to be continuously checking your market. The other honorable mention that I really want to talk about is Skinner. So earlier we talked about potion dungeons, and one of the potion dungeons is all about buffing the champion. It's the magic keep. So the champion that will ascend your magic champions relies heavily on buffs. So just ignoring the stat lines for the moment, Skinner here does have an attack 1 enemy, 100% chance, removes 2 random buffs from the target. Skinner is this a really amazing boss killer as well, because through the campaign there's a lot of bosses that will rely on buffs to keep them alive or keep them afloat. So Skinner gets this really great mention that upon removing buffs, also attacks 1 enemy 3 times. So if you are in need, or if you're struggling on these dungeons, Skinner is somebody that you might take to 40, right? Enough that they can still be relevant for a long time, but I would not take Skinner anywhere past 40. Soros, there's a bunch of people who've taken him to like 50, or some people have even taken him to 60 because of how reliable his kit was. I would end around 40 or 50 for Soros. By that point in the game, when you can rank characters up to 5-star or 6-star, it's very hard to justify spending those resources on Soros. You'll be getting rares that are a little bit more interesting and whatnot. Again, honorable mentions here. Hunger is not terrible. He can put on a shield equal to HP. So this is a way to easily shield your team and help keep them alive. The other big advantage of having an AoE shield on an uncommon is that characters that leech life. So earlier we mentioned Duelist, that when she deals damage, she gets 20% of that life back. Shields actually stop that in this game. So they have to burn through the shield first and do HP damage. This is also true for things like block damage or unkillable buffs. Unkillable just means that your character can't go below 1 HP. If your character's at 1 HP and a character does 8,000 damage, but you're at 1 HP, they're not actually doing 8,000 damage, they're doing 0 damage. They therefore are gaining 0 life, because they're not reducing the health bar to gain any life back. So things like shields or unkillables and stuff like that can be good. And likewise, he has a stun. His stun is a very low chance, so never depend on it. Understand, though, that he's got a shield in his kit and he's got a stun in his kit. He was somebody I used on my very first playthrough, and I liked him a lot. He did get replaced. He was my first replacement, though. He was the first person out of my party. But when I first pulled him, I was excited for an HP champion. And he does have a respectable HP of 18,000 and compared to the 16,000. Moving on, I need to actually kind of glance through all these real quick, because I don't have every single uncommon memorized just yet. I know there's another one that I'm thinking of. So like Vile Spawn is a support champion where heal an ally by 10% of their maximum HP. You get a better rare, but again, in terms of freely booking up a champion, I want to mention that she would be of note that if you're really struggling for a healer, or if you're trying to do like kind of a pyramid scheme, right, where you have like one champion who's super amazing and then a bunch of supports, using things like Hunger and Vile Spawn, you can keep very specific people alive. I don't know if I would even use her for that reason. Again, though, I want to mention that she is available. She is something to be considered. Damphire is somebody, I really like her. Admittedly, a lot of her stats are not in a great place. Her speed's not in the worst place, so that's why she gets this mention. But the two skills that she has that is quite great is that she attacks all enemies and heals by 20% of the damage inflicted. This is a great way to keep her alive, and kind of like Soros, where they will attack all enemies. This is a great way to get through the normal campaign. Also then has attacks one enemy, and then if she kills the target, grants an extra turn. This is a great way to get extra damage, or if your Elhain, let's say, who's really great at wave clear, hits everybody and puts them into a low state, Damphire can kind of go and clean up after the fact, and is quite amazing. Moving on to the Dark Elves. Sniper, you get Sniper right off the bat, so if you get any additional copies, I would encourage you that if you're using Sniper as a second magic damage dealer, that you start booking her up. She also has the benefit that her cooldown is really, really low on her A2. It's like only 2 books need to land there. But she can be quite good. And again, stat-wise, she has that 1200 attack that we like to see on an attack champion. Moving on here. Herald is not somebody I would encourage, but he does have places a 30% crit rate buff on all allies. So again, if you're doing that pyramid style that I was talking about, you can get this down to 2 turns, which is quite amazing, meaning he'll kind of consistently keep up a critical rate buff on all your team all the time. Stat-wise, he's pretty low. He's a support, so his best stat being HP is great. His speed is in that moderate place, so he's fine. And then he can decrease the speed of enemies. Again, really low percent chance, even when fully booked. But worth mentioning, I used Cultist for his AoE. He has an attacks all enemies, and then a very small chance to place a poison debuff on all enemies. I really liked Cultist. Admittedly, he's not great, but if you need a force champion that does attack all enemies, and then his other skill is attacks one enemy 2 times, he will feel like he's putting out the damage. Again, though, the speed is very slow. And on your very first playthrough of the game, we kind of teach on this channel that speed and accuracy will carry you through most of the content. And then beyond that is, you know, getting your crit rate up. I have videos talking about artifacts and how to gear champions up properly. Dwarves, I don't believe the dwarves have anybody of note. Nobody that I know of. Nobody that I've consistently used or talked to other players about using. Same thing to the barbarians. As you can see, there are a lot of champions. I'm going to mention this honorable mention. I do want to put the caveat on that I do not like this champion, and I don't think it's worth it. But it's Shield Guard here. So Shield Guard has removes 1 debuff from this champion each turn. So that is really good. And there's plenty of reasons that you might want to use him just for that reason. Especially as a common champion for your team. But here, that he has attacks all enemies. Fills this champion's turn meter by 20% on each critical hit. Damage inflicted is proportional to defense. This is a decent skill. I would like to have seen his defense at 1200, but because his speed is just so slow, all of his stats are below where I want them. His HP is not bad, obviously. It's only at 15,000 instead of the 16,000. He's not in a terrible place. But a lot of people will say that you can use him as a farmer, and then you just load him up with defense, and because of this 20% on each critical hit, That skill is amazing. I do want to say that out loud. I want to give him that proper recognition. There's very few skills in this like this in the game, especially for 20%. Makes Shield Guard really good, and aesthetically, I do like him. I do like the way that he looks, not necessarily his color palette, but I do think he doesn't look bad at all. And then his A1 is attacks one enemy, decreases speed. Again, damage proportional to defense. The reason I don't encourage this champion, or don't have a higher focus on him, is the fact that building a defensive champion earlier in the game is very, very difficult to do. And because his defensive stat is low, yes, the defense percentage items are going to be helpful on him, but they're not going to feel great on him until you get him of a much higher level, or if all of your gear has a flat defense substat. And early game, it's very, very hard pre-30, right? So if you're talking about champions like 30 and under, to build them defensively and have it be noticeable. Yes, you'll notice that he's not dying as fast as, like, let's say your Kale or your Elhain, but he also won't feel like he's putting out super damage, because the reason is you need to get that crit rate up on him. So this means that his gloves you'll want crit chance on, and then all the rest of his gear you'll want to make sure that they are also crit chance. So that means that to make him look good, as high-end players will say that he is, you will have to invest heavily on, I think it's chapter 4, where you get the crit chance gear. So you'll need 6 pieces from there, for his weapon, helm, blah, 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 that all give that additional crit chance bonus, 12%. Then you will also need his gloves to be at least 3-star crit chance, which will only take him up to 30%. If you were to 16-star, 6 plus 16, 3-star gauntlets, which nobody in the game will encourage you to do, I don't think that he will have the impact of some of the other champions that we've mentioned in this video. He'll feel like his defense is good, and again, this passive of removing a debuff from him is very good. So he's not like obsolete, or he's not unusable. It's kind of a use with care. Understand that in order to make his A2 very noticeable, it's only going to be very noticeable when you're attacking like an all force wave, or if you really heavily focus on getting those crit chances up to making him really great. Other than that, again, honorable mentions, like you have Zephyr Sniper, where she can put a continuous heal on all allies. It is a very small continuous heal. The point, though, is she could be an AoE healer if you feel like your whole team needs healing more than your War Priest is giving out. And then, in additional to being a healer, she is an attacks all enemies. Has a low chance of putting a random skill on cooldown, which is quite an amazing skill. So she's actually an AoE healer with a decent skill based around defense. And again, I just discouraged a different champion for their defensive utility, but she at least gets up to that 1200 defense and has 100 speed. So she's going to be a little bit more noticeable than Shield Guard, who is very, very slow. I see in chat a lot of times, or I see a lot of high-end players recommending Shield Guard to new players, and to me it feels like a trap, and I don't want you wasting resources on a champion that might not take you very far, or you're not going to feel like is amazing right off the bat. I do believe that Zephyr Sniper, you literally could just equip her in anything, like even in attack gear, and she's going to feel a little bit more noticeable for her continuous heal. What's nice is because she's a defensive champion, the continuous heal is going to be a lot more noticeable on her. In my chat, we have a mention for Commander in the Banner Lords. Pardon me, I went into the wrong place. I never used Commander. I was thinking that it was Word Bearer. So, decent HP stat, very close to that 1600. So she's a support, so I don't expect her attack or defense to be over 1,000. It would be a bonus if it was. She does have 101 speed, so that is something definite to note. And then the rest is just normal. Heals the ally with the lowest HP by 40% of this champion's HP. I actually really like things like that because it does incentivize you to build off of that HP stat that's already high. So yes, I do like this. This could be a great single target heal. Completely fills the target's turn meter if the ally is fully healed. This champion's turn meter cannot be filled by this skill. I really wish there was more things like that in the game. That'd be really cool to see that as a more common drawback. And then attacks one enemy has a 15% chance, or eventually 25% chance to place a stun. So yes, Commander could be another way if you needed a force healer instead of somebody like Zephyr Sniper to be a little bit better. And then getting off the stun, I can't tell you how good it feels when you land a stun. It just feels amazing to watch that character lose a turn, or you no longer have to focus that character for an entire turn, like until they get their turn. The only thing that feels better about landing a stun is when you land like a stun, sleep, or freeze right before they take their turn, right? If their turn meter's filled all the way and you slap a stun on them and then they just like, they go, so like the debuff looks like it instantly goes off. It's terrific. I hope this video was helpful. There's nobody else that I can think of that I would heavily encourage anybody investing into. The big ones are your Armiger, your Outlaw Monk, your Soros. Those three are kind of the most frequently used uncommons, and it's also because you'll be getting more champions throughout the day, or throughout playing the game. Next video that we will do, we will talk about the rares that you can get out of the campaign, and we'll kind of go into an in-depth analysis on each one of them. So if you guys like this content, make sure to subscribe. If you like the interactions that I do, or the heavy teaching that we focus on in this channel, please consider going over to twitch.tv/SprinkleBeard. Give me a follow over there, or even consider subscribing. Right now, I'm doing quite well with my subscriptions. We had a crazy train earlier this week happen, but it meant a lot to me, and it helps me out financially. Right now, I'm on disability from a recent heart attack. That's not the point of the video. Anyways, guys, have a great day. I hope this video was helpful, and until that next time, ta-ta.